Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello to all SBR students. I hope all of you are doing well. The time for practice question. SBR December 23. Question number 1. 30 marks question. Kabelo company. Students, don't forget the rule of 2080. Rule of 2080. 20% of the allocated time you must have to invest for planning of the question. For planning the question. Number 1. First of all, quickly allocate the time for this 30 marks question. For 30 marks question, 1.8 minutes per mark. So you have 54 minutes. 54 minutes. You have 54 minutes. Out of 54 minutes, you have to invest 20% time, approx 10 minutes for planning. Planning means read the question context, read the question requirement very carefully. Understand the requirement very carefully. And before starting the question, brainstorm. Brainstorm means identify the key points. That's called planning. And then once you plan the question, attack, execute. So you have total 54 minutes, 10 minutes for planning, 44 minutes for execution. So time starts now. So from where we need to start reading, don't ignore the main context. Quickly read the main context, quickly. Kabelo company is a parent company, okay, of the group whose financial year end 31st December X5, okay. So year end 31st December X5. The following exhibits available on the left hand side of the screen provide information relevant to the question. Acquisition of Trudeau's company, okay, something about acquisition. Provides information regarding the acquisition of Trudeau company and other information relevant to complete the consolidated statement of cash flow. Okay, the question is about consolidated cash flow. It's easy, huh? Relax your mind. Consolidated cash flow, it's easy topic. It's not difficult. Don't worry. Financial instrument, second point, financial instrument contains information about a number of financial instruments held by the Kabelo Group. Consolidated statements. This include the draft extract of for the consolidated statement of cash flow together with extract of from the finalized consolidated balance sheet or financial position for the year end 31st December X5, including comparative figures. So you have identified that year end 31st December X5, it's a consolidated cash flow and some points about financial instrument as well, and the acquisition of the subsidiary. So quickly read the requirement. Okay, read the requirement. A requirement using Exhibit 1. Adjust the pre-populated spreadsheet to prepare revised extract of operating and investing activities of the consolidated statement of cash flow for Kabelo Group for the year end 31st December X5. So here you need to make adjustment in the form of correction of error or in the form of identify the missing figures. So need to adjust and revise the extract of operating and investing activity. Examiner will never ask you to prepare consolidated cash flow or balance sheet or income statement. It's always about revise extracts. 14 marks. Number 2, A2, explain the adjustments required to correct the operating and investing activity of the consolidated statement of cash flow for the Kabelo Group for the year end 31st December X5. So A, it's actually the requirement about correction of errors and explanation of the adjustments. 1 and 2, that's total 25 marks question. B, using Exhibit 2, advise financial controller how the various financial instruments, including overdraft, should be presented in consolidated statement of cash flow. 6 marks. It's very norm. Students, it's very norm that with question number 1, major marks belongs to group accounts. Here the cash flows. Here the part A. And the other part, B part, a limited marks. Here 6 marks about other part of syllabus. So here 6 marks something about financial instrument. Okay. So whatever the understanding you have made with the requirement or the main context, now you, based on this mindset, you need to enter with the main context of the question. For example, it's about the cash flow. So you need to read the context of the question with respect to the cash flow. Okay. Now, Kabelo company acquired 80%, 100,000 equity shares of Trudeau's 30th June X5. 30th June X5 is the acquisition date. Consolidation date 31st December X5. That means acquisition is 6 months before the reporting date. The consideration consists of cash payment $5 per share acquired, and issue of one Kabelo $1 equity share for every 4 shares acquired in Trudeau's company. So that means one cash payment and one share for share. By the way, cash payment only affect to the consolidated cash flow. Huh? Share for share will not affect to the consolidated cash flow. Kabelo policy is to value NCI at fair value at the date of acquisition. Fair value of Kabelo's company and the Trudeau's shares 30th June X5, $13, $8 respectively. Here the share price of parent and subsidiary. Carrying amount of net assets, carrying amount of the net assets reported by Trudeau's 30th June X5 as follows. This is the carrying amount. Property, plant, equipment, inventory, trade receivable, cash and cash equivalents, trade payables. This is the acquired subsidiary net asset at acquisition. The only fair value adjustment on acquisition to plant which had a fair value of 50,000 above its carrying amount, upward fair value adjustment. The group pays tax 30% and deferred tax was correctly accounted for in consolidated balance sheet. In consolidated balance sheet, deferred tax were correctly reported. The taxation figure in the statement P&L for the year end 31st December X5, 385,600. Okay. And this figure has been included as taxation paid within the draft statement of cash flow. The group's financial controller has accurately completed the consolidated statement of financial position, consolidated statement of P&L and OCI. But the consolidated cash flow is in draft. So consolidated balance sheet income statement perfectly. They have made perfect. That's completed. Huh? But cash flow is only draft. Financial controller has not yet considered the impact of acquisition of Trudeau's company on consolidated cash flow. Okay. So consolidated cash flows having missing adjustment about the acquisition of subsidiary, all aspects. Further, the statement of cash flow figures for movement of inventory, trade receivable, trade payable, and property plant equipment have been calculated by considering simply difference in the year-end balance in the consolidated balance sheet from X4 to X5. Once again, the statement of cash flow figures for movements in inventory, trade receivable, trade payables, property plant equipment have been calculated by considering simply the difference in the year-end balance in consolidated statement of financial position from 31st December X4 to X5. Is this right? No. Opening balance, for example, property plant equipment, ending balance of property plant equipment. So you need to also We also need to incorporate the effect of acquisition of subsidy. Then need to identify disposal or acquisition of assets. So this is the mistake. So if we combinedly cover these two paragraphs, so simply conclude that with consolidation, with the consolidated cash flow, uh, no adjustment till now affected with respect to the consolidated cash flow. With respect to the consolidated cash flow, the acquisition of subsidy, it's not affected. This transaction is not yet affected. So we need to adjust the cash flow with respect to the acquisition of the subsidy. That's the question. Now, goodwill of Trudeau's company was impaired during the year. No other goodwill impairment within the group. So just 6 months before the reporting date, Trudeau's acquired, sorry, parent acquired the Trudeau's company. And within 6 months, all goodwill become impaired. And there were no other goodwill impairment within the group. Okay. So we need to identify the impairment aspects. Impairment loss. Depreciation charge for the group for the year end 31st December X5 625060. If this information is given, that means it's right. If nothing mentioned is not right or wrong, it's just mentioned depreciation charge for the group 625060. That means it's absolutely right. There were no disposal of non-current asset by group during the year, although there were some addition paid by cash. Okay, so missing figure, sorry, missing figure of property plant equipments conclude with respect to addition. There is no disposal. Okay, so during the reading of the question, just a go through about the consolidated statement. Okay, this is the consolidated statement, consolidated cash flow. Draft extract, 31st December 5. Cash inflows, profit before tax, depreciation, increase in inventory, increase in trade receivables, trade and other payables, cash generated from operations, taxation paid. Okay, so there is no goodwill impairment. Missing, no goodwill impairment. Acquisition of property, plant, equipment. Consideration paid, not yet calculated. Extract of the balance sheet, property, plant, equipment, goodwill, deferred tax liability, current tax liability. Okay, these are the points. Okay. So during the reading, during the reading, during the time for the during the time of the reading of the question, you just overview the available pre-populated uh, consolidated accounts. Here the cash flow. Now the second extract, financial instrument. Here Kabelo Group has a number of financial instruments presented within its consolidated statement of financial position. Okay, financial instrument, term financial instrument. So that includes financial asset, financial liability, or equity instrument. Some group entities which had a surplus cash resource had acquired debentures in other non-group entities. Other non-group. It's not about the intra-group, it's non-group entities. So here, some of the group entities, either parent, either subsidiary, acquired debentures. So acquisition of debenture, it's an investing activity with the cash flow. Other group entities had raised finance by issuing bonds. So if the subsidiary or the parent issue the bonds, that is about financial liability or financing activity with cash flows. Kabelo finance, Kabelo parent finance the acquisition of Trudeau by acquiring bank loan. Okay. acquiring bank loan. So bank liability, it's also the financing activity. Kabelo also had an overdrawn bank balance, 31st December X5, overdrawn bank balance. So overdrawn bank balance, that's bank OD, is a financial liability in the cash flow. Normally it's a part of cash and cash equivalent. Normally. But here is the statement. The overdrawn bank, that is bank OD, fluctuates regularly from an in funds balance to an overdrawn balance. Very simple point. Is this bank overdraft on occasional basis, on a rare basis, or bank overdraft, or your bank balance fluctuations, which results of bank OD on a random basis or on a regular basis? It's a rare basis or a regular basis. If it's rare, so it the bank OD reflects or must be presented as cash and cash equivalent. It's occasionally, it's random. But if the bank OD maintained on a very regular basis, so actually this bank OD support you for financing. So instead of cash and cash equivalent, IS 7 says that it's better to present the bank OD as a financing activity. It's a requirement of IS 7. So normally you report the bank OD or you present the bank OD as cash and cash equivalent because it's a norm that bank OD or bank overdraft, it's very occasional, very random basis. But if it's a regular practice of the company, so it's like a loan. So it should be reported as a financing activity. It's a presentation of the cash flow. So that is the point examiner examined here. So there are 4 points here, and the B requirement is about using exhibit to advise financial controller as how to the various financial instrument, including overdraft, should presented in consolidated cash flow. So read the requirement very carefully. Here examiner not asking about to discuss the thing about IFRS 9, that's financial asset, financial liability, all these things. No, just ask the presentation with respect to consolidated statement of cash flow. That's a point. So this is what all about reading the question. First of all, main context and requirement quickly, then read and develop your mind, and then read the context based on requirement, and then once again read the requirement, fix your mind that what's the examiner expectation. So here the last point, A requirement, revise extract of operating and investing activity, A1. A2, explanation of the adjustment of A2 is explanation the adjustment of A1. B requirement, advice to financial controller with respect to the presentation of different financial instrument. So before starting the question, 2 things are important. Make sure that you have read the question and understand the requirement. It's very carefully, very precisely. Number 2, before starting the question, you need to make a brainstorm. First, for example, you have decided to attempt A1 and A2 or part A. So first of all, you have to open this spreadsheet that is about the working that is consolidated cash flow extract. So First of all, before starting anything, you have to develop your mindset. What adjustment I have to incorporate with this cash flow aspects. That's a very important point. By the way, students, the first phase of the lecture is over. That is about the reading and understanding. And now it's about the second phase of the lecture. That's that's to attempt part A of the question. So we need to take a break for this moment. Take a break of 2 to 3 minutes, pause the video, and wait for the next video for the execution part of part A and then part B. Thank you. Okay, Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Welcome back once again. So it's time for the execution of the question. So before execution, the very important point, and that is about the brainstorming. That is about the brainstorming. So important point is that you have to brainstorm. Brainstorming means you need to identify what are the key points here. So here, the adjustment, we need to make an adjustment and explanation. Adjustment and explanation. So what explanation, what adjustment should be considered, or we should incorporate with the particular with this question? For example, here examiner particularly says that the movement of these assets not incorporated the acquisition aspects. And also mention the examiner here, consolidated cash flows not incorporated the impact of acquisition. So very simple, very simple. We have to highlight or to incorporate the adjustment. For example, property plant equipment. Make an adjustment of the property plant equipment to identify the figure of addition. Goodwill and impairment. Tax aspect, yes. Yes, very important. Consideration with respect to acquisition of subsidy. It's very important point. And number 5, that's movement of working capital. Movement of working capital. So what I suggest, these 5 adjustments that we should consider. Sir, how we will identify with the cash flow that these adjustments are required? A very simple rule must have to bear in your mind. Whenever you are attempting any question of the cash flow, whenever you are going to start the working of the consolidated cash flows, from where you will start working? This is a question. From where we will start the working? From where we will start the working? Here, very simple rule. Very simple. Always start working based on balance sheet. For example, here the balance sheet extract available, and the first component is property plant equipment. So just start working with property plant equipment. Working number 1, property plant equipment. Working number 2, goodwill. Working number 3, tax. The things, once you start working with the property plant equipment, then goodwill, then tax, the things will unfold accordingly. So that's why I have developed the list with the sequence. property plant equipment, goodwill, and impairment, tax, acquisition of subsidy, consideration, and movement of working capital. That's the point. So let's start. Let's start the thing. Yes, come on. Come on. You must be with me, huh, students? The first working is about property plant equipment. Property plant equipment. Property plant equipment. Yes, come on. It's very simple. Working number one, property plant equipment. Number one, it's simple about the ledgers. The balance at 31st December X4. The balance at 31st December X4. The balance is 3,125,300. You need to incorporate the adjustment of acquisition of Trudeau. We acquired the Trudeau and the Trudeau balance sheet, the Trudeau property plant equipment 421,000. 421,000. Okay, 421,000. The fair value adjustment, students, the fair value adjustment, that's 50,000. 50,000. The depreciation point, that depreciation point, very precisely here mentioned the depreciation, 385,600. 385,600. By the way, depreciation figure is also available here. 625,060. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Minus 625,060. Okay. And your balance and 279 2971240. Here ending balance. So it's very clear. The movement is increasing trend and the difference is 697,060. And this is what about PPE acquisition. That is a point. Property plant equipment acquisition and acquisition on the basis of cash. So this is the first adjustment. So simultaneously, you need to incorporate the adjustment. You need to incorporate the adjustment. That is acquisition, one column, acquisition of Trudeau's company. So we need to put an adjustment of 697,660. 697,660. 697,660. So this is the figure. Acquisition of property plant equipment. Here mentioned minus 543600. Examiner recommend that whatever the figure mentioned with the examining team, don't delete this figure. Rather than make adjustment. Make adjustment means, for example, this is the column of acquisition adjustment. Another column, for example, about working capital. Working capital adjustment. And last one is revised. So instead of make any deletion here, 543,600, you have identified that the actual figure of property, plant, equipment acquisition of cash is 697,660. So you just mention the revised figure. You just mention this revised figure is equal to minus 697,660. That's all. You just mention this. Sir, instead of that, we make some adjustment, means the difference between 697,660 and this. No, no, no. Don't waste the time. Your time is very much precious. If you have identified that this is the right figure, so final column of the revised, you just mention there. That's all. That's very simple. Save your time. So first you have made the adjustment. Sorry, you have made the working. Adjust your cash flows. Adjusted figure you have incorporated with the cash flow. And simultaneously, you know very well here, whatever the adjustment you are making, you need to make explanation as well. So simultaneously, you can start the explanation with the word processor. Explanation. Part B, explanation. That is 10 marks. You can start the consolidated statement of cash flow. Classify the movement of cash and cash equivalent with respect to operating, investing, and financing activities. The adjustments details for the acquisition of Trudeau's company are as follows. And number one, the purchase of property, plant, equipment. Number one, the purchase of property, plant, equipment. Make an heading and start. Very clear. This is 10 marks question. The explanation is about 10 marks. 5 adjustment. For example, with exam allocation, here 3 marks. Quick working. The cash paid to acquire property, plant, equipment during the year must exclude the effect of the acquisition of Trudeau's company. So your addition of the cash must exclude this component. The acquisition company will increase the non-current asset or the property plant equipment by the fair value by their fair value at the date at acquisition, being the carrying amount of, I think that it's 421,000. Yes, am I right? Yes, 421,000 of dollar 421,000 plus the fair value adjustment is 50,000. Huh? Fair value adjustment of dollar 50,000 needed at the acquisition date. It's very simple. Here you need to mention the initial, for cash flow adjustment, the initial recognition of the property plant equipment is not a cash flow for the Kabelo group. This is very important. Huh? The initial recognition of property plant equipment, it's not a cash flow. That's why with the property plant equipment, the missing figure, we have identified the missing figure of addition of cash, the addition of cash, the impact of this property plant equipment reduces the amount of addition of cash. So this is purchase of property plant equipment. Now, the next adjustment according to the plan. According to the plan, and the plan is that the next adjustment is goodwill. Now come on, goodwill. So what you are doing, working, putting the adjustment and make description. Now the next point is goodwill. Now come on. Goodwill. What is about goodwill? Come on. Working to goodwill. Investment. First of all, investment. First thing is cash consideration. 80% of 100,000 shares, cash consideration $5. So it's very simple. It's equal to what? Calculated 100,000 into 80% into $5. Cash consideration, that's equal to 400,000. Share for share, 100,000 80% and one Kabelo $1 equity share for every four. And the Kabelo share price 13. So quick is equal to 100,000 into 80% into 1/4 into 13. 2,60,000. And this is what about the cost of investment. This is about cost of investment. 600,000. 6,60,000. NCI at acquisition. NCI at acquisition. What is the value of NCI at acquisition? 100,000 shares, 20% belongs to subsidy and the subsidiary share price $8 Trudeau's. So is equal to 100,000 into 0.2 multiply by 8, 1,60,000. Sorry, it's not minus, it's 160,000. Less the fair value of net asset acquisition. So here the carrying amount of net assets 747,600, 747,600. Fair value adjustment 50,000, and deferred tax on fair value adjustment. Deferred tax. So deferred tax increase the liability, decreasing the net assets. It's 30%. 30%. So is equal to 50,000 into 30%. Sir, do we need to show the workings of all above? The cell also incorporated whatever the working you have mentioned with the cell. Examiner will check your cell and allocate the marks accordingly. Don't worry. 782 600. So here is the goodwill point. Here is the goodwill point. What is the amount of goodwill? Yes, amount of goodwill 37,400. This is a goodwill amount. So with the one heading, goodwill and impairment. This is goodwill at acquisition. Goodwill at acquisition. Okay. Now it's time. Now it's time to determine the uh, value of impairment. Just like the ledger. So identify the balance. Balance 31st December X4. Number one. What is the balance? 31st December X4. 441,600. 478,500. And balance at 31st December X5. Ending balance. So opening balance plus goodwill acquisition 478,500. Ending balance, it's reducing trend. 447,400. It's reducing trend. That means something impairment. 31,100. Goodwill impairment. Non-cash item. Huh? Don't forget, this is non-cash item. So goodwill impairment. So what adjustment do we need to incorporate above? Two adjustments here. Number one, the point of cash consideration. And number two, this is a non-cash item, 31,100. So one by one, adjustment. Adjustment number two, goodwill and impairment. Goodwill and impairment. So here, goodwill impairment. You need to, actually this is a missing figure. Goodwill impairment. Goodwill impairment. So here, you need to incorporate the goodwill impairment. 31,100. Sorry, it's not minus, it's positive. Why positive? Very carefully incorporate plus minus figure. because it's a non-cash item. It's a non-cash item. So you have to add back with the profit, like a depreciation, like a depreciation. So till now, the second explanation, so the second adjustment we have done, goodwill impairment, we have incorporated with the cash flow. Now it's time to make an explanation. Yes, why not? Goodwill and impairment. It's something about 2 marks. So how much you need to write? It's very simple. It is important that the effect of non-cash items like impairment need to eliminate. Impairment of goodwill must be added back to profit before tax, to PBT, since they would reduce group profits but without impacting on the consolidated statement of cash flows. That's enough. That's enough. By the way, you need to know that if we consider the marking scheme, so for property plant equipment, whatever the working we have done, marking, whatever we have done with respect to property plant equipment about calculation, about calculation, about calculation, that is about uh, the aspect about the property plant equipment working, all these things. You have earned the 2 marks for goodwill calculation, sorry, for goodwill and impairment working. You have got 7 marks. This is for calculation, huh? A part of theory. So here with calculation part, you covered 2 plus 7 marks, and with theoretical aspects, till now you have get 3 plus 2, 5 marks. Sir, you are doing the calculation and theory simultaneous. What I personally suggest, you should do practice in this manner. You will save the time. Instead once you complete all calculation, then start the theoretical aspects. And by the way, examining team recommendation also this method. Otherwise, if you're comfortable, once you complete the calculation, then move for the theory. It's your wish. It's totally your wish. You can do that if you're comfortable. But important thing is that, but the important point is that your quality of answer must be in a manner to pass the exam, and the time management. So whatever the structure you follow, for example, if you are comfortable with first calculation, then theory, it's up to you. Simultaneously calculation or theory, it's up to you. Don't worry. Now move on. The next part. According to the planning, the next part is about the deferred tax. But before moving the deferred tax, okay, deferred tax. Let's move on. Taxation. Next part is about taxation. Come on. Yes, very simple adjustments. Taxation. What is the current balance about the taxation? What is the current balance about the taxation here? Current tax 31st December X4 259,600. This is about the taxation. Next part. What about the deferred tax? 2,50,000. What about the fair value adjustment? Fair value adjustment, that is about 50,000 into 30%. 15,000. Yes. So here the opening balance and the fair value adjustment effects, that's increase in the deferred tax liability. Charge to P&L, it's mentioned on the question. Charge to P&L, that is 385,600. 385,600. 385,600. 385,600. Okay. And what is the ending balance? Here is the ending balance. Current tax 364,300 and deferred tax 1,30,000. So what is the movement? That is about the tax paid. Tax paid amount is 413,200. So tax paid amounts 413,200. 413,200. So 413,200 tax paid amount. 413,200. Now you need to adjust. Here tax payments, ignore tax payments 385,600. Here 385,600. But the right figure is 413,200. The right figure is 413,200. The right figure is 413,200. 413,200. This is the right figure. So tax adjustment having 2 marks. 2 marks. So I can say that with respect to the investing activity, this is, you need to mention working 1. This is working 3. It's better to mention the, in fact, you must have to mention the reference of the working. And working 2. Tax payment, it's cash outflow. Now it's time to make the description, text adjustment. Text adjustment, marks allocation, 3 marks. So you have to write the answer for 3 marks. The first statement, the tax figure, the tax amount should be the cash paid. Always start with a very simple statement. With the cash flow, the tax amount should be the cash paid by the group to the tax authorities. Very simple statement. During the year. Or you just mentioned that tax amount should be the cash paid by the group during the year. It is important. Now you need to explain the adjustments. Therefore, the impact of deferred tax adjusted for in calculating the figure, since the movement in deferred tax is not a cash flow. Examiner expect you to explain this point. Why we incorporating the deferred tax with tax calculation? Because movement of deferred tax is not a cash flow. First thing. So 1 or 1.5 marks for this. But with this description, there is one missing point. The fair value. The fair value increase of $50,000 to the property plant equipment increase. You need to explain the deferred tax aspect. The carrying amount of property plant equipment for consolidation purpose. That is fair value adjustment. Without affecting the tax base of the asset of the PPE. A deferred tax liability arises on acquisition equal to 15,000. That is $50,000 into 30% of the fair value adjustment. This must exclude from consolidated statement of cash flow, so that only the cash transaction for tax paid is recognized. That's a point. This is for 3 marks. This is for 3 marks. That's very important. Now, the next point. Next point is about the adjustment related to as per the plan. Consideration paid for the acquisition of Trudeau's company. Consideration paid for the acquisition of Trudeau's company. So what the adjustment should be? Here you need to make adjustment. Number one, the cash paid for acquisition is 400,000. It's an outflow. But you know very well based on your regular studies that the adjustment, we will not just mention 400,000 as outflow, because we need to consider in this way, if we acquire the subsidy, so what will be the impact of the group accounts cash flows or the group accounts cash book? So acquisition of subsidy, you paid 400,000, but after the payment you consolidate the accounts. Once you consolidate the accounts, so the consolidation of the subsidy having the cash amount 24,900. So impact on the consolidated cash flow is about 400,000 outflow and 24,800, 900 is inflow. So here 400,000 minus 24,900. 400,000 minus 24,900. Okay, that's impact the minus 375,100. So this adjustment marks only one mark. Only one mark. Consideration, one mark. But for description, you need to mention the description as well, very quickly. Here the allocated part for this, once a minute. Sorry. Here about 2 marks, 2 marks. Everyone having 2 marks. 2 marks. Yes, start. The cash consideration, for the acquisition of Trudeau company should be included as an outflow in investing activity. Yes. but the consideration as share exchange must not be included since or as it is not a cash flow. Number one, very basic. Number two, the cash balance of Trudeau on acquisition is effectively a cash addition to the group. So the cash consideration to acquire Trudeau company is therefore shown net of the cash and cash equivalent acquired on acquisition. So this is the description you need to mention. Very simple. Description you need to mention here. Very simple. Now the last point, that is about the working capital. The plan we have made with respect to property, plant, equipment, goodwill impairment, tax, consideration of acquisition subsidy, movement of capital, working capital. Now it's time for the movement of working capital. Movement of the working capital. Students, you need to recall the very basic aspect of the movement of the working capital. You need to recall a very important aspect about the movement of the working capital. Let's take a quick basic example about the movement of working capital. Then based on this example, we will incorporate the adjustment of the working capital with the consolidated cash flow. Number one, working capital movement. For example, trade receivable. Trade receivable. A very basic example. For example, opening balance. A basic example, opening balance of 100. Let's suppose. Credit sales, the ledger of trade receivables. This is a ledger of trade receivables. Credit sales. Credit sales. For example, the credit sales of 160. Opening balance 100, credit sales, for example, not 60, it's let's suppose it's about 85. Opening balance 100, credit sales 85. You have received during the year the amount of 60. The amount of 60. So the ending balance, it's about 125. It's very simple. 100 plus 185, sorry, plus 85 minus 60. 100 plus 85 minus 60, 125. This is the ledger that is received, and this is ending balance. Listen very carefully. So with respect to the cash flow, what you will do, you just take out the ending balance of 125, and take out the opening balance, and you just observe the movement. The movement is increase in trend, that receivable increase opening versus ending, and 25%, 25 increase, and you must have to minus 25. Okay, so you compare opening balance 100 with 125. But what is actual logic here? The logic here is that you need to make adjustment of minus 25. Why? Minus with the profit figure of sales, profit figure of the income statement. With the profit of income statement, you need to minus 25. Why you minus? Because with the profit, credit sales, with the profit, credit sale includes 85, but you only receive 60 during the year. The profit, the PBIT or profit before tax, includes the credit sales of 85, but you just received 60. So can you please make a difference between credit sales and receive? Yes, 85 minus 60. So actually this minus 25 is adjustment of 80 minus 60. So I know that you people just learn the things ending, opening, and increase and minus. Okay, don't worry. Do the same thing. But I'm just telling you the actual logic. But case 2, for example, if I say that opening balance remains same, credit sales remain same, but also here about acquisition of subsidy. Due to acquisition of subsidy, there is some 5 amount. For example, opening balance 100, credit sales 80. I'm changing this figure. And 5 is the figure about acquisition of subsidy. Do remember this acquisition of subsidy, it's not about the cash flow. It's not the cash flow. It's just the impact of acquisition of subsidies, trade receivable. Okay. 60, for example, receive 60, and this amount is remain 125. Now, if we wanted to identify this increase or minus figure, so if we just say 125 and 100, so this will be the mistake, because if we identify 125 minus 100, here the figure of 25, here the figure of 25, but this 25 includes aspect of the acquisition of subsidy. So with respect to your earlier studies, with respect to your regular studies, sorry, what we should do? First, we need to make adjustment. 125 minus the impact of acquisition. The ending, we have to adjust the effect of acquisition of subsidy. So other than acquisition of subsidy, what's the movement of working capital? 125 minus 5, 120. Then we identify the figure, that is 120 minus 120. And this 20 is actual adjustment we need to incorporate here. Because credit sales 80 and receive only 60. So our credit sales reflect 80 figure, but only receive 60. So we need to make adjustment of this minus 20. Now the case 3, listen carefully. Students, listen carefully. Case 3. If I say to you that, if I say to you that, if this is the case, if this is the similar case, case 1, and if I say to you that actually we have missed the 5 figure of acquisition of subsidy with case 1. For example, this is the case 1 without considering the impact of acquisition subsidy, and this is the figure of minus 25. And after that, we have identified that with this figure, the movement ignore the impact of acquisition of subsidy 5, the figure of 5. So if we need to make an adjustment, what we should do, we need to actually we need to incorporate with the cash flow minus 20. But now this is the figure of the minus 25. So what we should do, if the figure is minus 25, we need to incorporate or add the figure of acquisition subsidy. So minus 25 plus 5, it's become minus 20. That's a point. Once again, if the information is given that only the case 1, and assume that there is no case 2, just mention that this is the case 1, this is the case 1, and we have ignored the impact of acquisition of subsidy, and you have only this minus 25, need to adjust. So what you should do, you need to incorporate the figure of 5. So this minus 25, incorporating the 5, it's become minus 20. That's a point. That is the same point here. Here, the inventory, trade receivable, inventory, trade receivable, and trade payables. But the issue is that we need to make adjustment for these figures. Inventory, trade receivables, and trade payables. These are the figures. Examiner particularly mentioned that we have ignored with all the movements about the acquisition of subsidy. And this is what about the spreadsheet. So this is about increase in inventory, increase in trade receivables. Let's take about the increase in inventory. So increase in inventory requires the adjustment of increase in inventory by acquisition 256,800. Do remember this is movement. This is movement 658,100. This is not opening ending balance. We don't have opening ending balance. We only have the movement 658,100. 658,100 is movement. So with the movement, if in the minus, and we have to incorporate the impact of acquisition, so automatically this minus figure need to adjust, need to reduce. So what will be the adjusted figure? Minus 658,100 plus this one, the adjusted figure is 401,300. Same, and this is what called increase in inventory, still increase in inventory. But very amazing another point, trade receivable 220,300. 220,300. minus 211,500, but the minus figure adding with positive figure, it's become positive figure of 8,800. That means after this adjustment, this is not the increase in trade and trade receivable, it's become decrease. It's become decrease. That is the very much important point. Decrease. Another point is about trade payable. 175 400. Do remember all the things we are working here, it's become reverse. 175 400 with acquisition of subsidiary, 175 400 trade payable, it's increasing trend. But here the trade receivable having impact of 93 900, and we need to incorporate the trade payable with the acquisition of subsidiary minus 175 400. 175 400, and the figure it's about 81,500 negative. Negative means now the trade and trade payables from increase to decrease. From increase to decrease. That is a point. This is the adjustment you need to make here. So whatever the adjustment you have done, whatever the adjustment, now you have to write it. You have to write it. It is also necessary to adjust the calculations for the working capital, for the other assets and liabilities, or you can mention the name of the trade receivable, trade payable, and inventory acquired when it is also necessary to adjust the calculation for the other assets of asset and liabilities resulting or acquired when get control over Trudeau's company. Inventory, debtors, and trade creditors. Since these items have consolidated the effect of the acquisition must be eliminated so that the movements on the assets and liabilities reflects only cash flows incurred by the group during the year. That's enough. This is also about 2 marks. Very basic and simple calculus explanation. And this is all about the working part. Sir, revised. Do you know that? You don't need to uh, mention the revised, completed, consolidated cash flows, balance sheet, or income statement. If you just hold the question here, you will be able to get all marks. There's no marks for the completion of revised or adjusted consolidated cash flow extracts. By the way, working capital, for working capital, you will be able to get 3 marks. For each one adjustment, I have 1 marks. Anyways, you can just mention 1318 100. Depreciation, same. Tax paid, we have done it. That's all. Okay, this point. That is about the acquisition of land. That's enough. No need to put any more working. Don't invest unnecessary time. You don't need to means reconcile these figures. You don't need to reconcile the figure or reconcile the balance sheet. No need. That's enough. This is all over. No need to invest any more time. So that's all. That's all about the part A. Now, students, it's time for part B. It's time for part B. Now, quickly read the requirement first. Using Exhibit 2, advise financial controller how the various financial instruments, including overdraft, should be presented in consolidated statement of cash flow. Okay, this is what about the details. Investment in debentures, issuing of bonds, financing of Kabelo to acquire the subsidy by bank loan and bank overdraft. There are 4 components. So first of all, need to determine how much marks. 6 marks. So for 6 marks, you have approx 10 to 11 minutes. 10 to 11 minutes. Huh? So first of all, brainstorm. Don't ignore 2080 rule for every part of the question. So number 1, the important point, students, brainstorming quickly. Part B, out of 11 minutes, you can easily invest 1 or 2 minutes to plan your answer, brainstorming. So here, 6 marks question, 6 marks. So you need to jot down some points or develop the mindset that out of 6 marks, I will start something related to investment in bonds. It's something a generic answer for 2 marks. Then issuance of debentures and bank loans with Investment in bonds is something, investing activity, issuing of debentures and bank loan. It's about uh, financing activity and the discussion about overdraft. So I will easily handle. You can ask yourself that for 6 marks, these 3 points are good enough. So let's start. Let's start. No calculation. It's all about the theoretical aspect. Part B, presentation in the statement of cash flows. Financial instruments, presentation in statement of cash flow. So number one, investment in bonds. Investment in bonds. You just quickly write the answer. Investment quickly includes investment in debts and equity instruments. Very basic, very basic start. Instruments with the intention to generate future income and cash flows. Here, the acquisition, it's very simple. First basic line, then application. Here, the acquisition of debentures should be presented with investing activities. Very simple. As they were acquired, it's mentioned on the question as well, to increase returns. With very conservative word counts, I just I I write my answer with a very conservative wordings that reflects the knowledge and the application content as well. And you can get easily 2 marks. 2 marks. Another point, investment in debenture, issuance of debentures and bank loans. So here you mention financing activities. Financing activities includes the arrangement of finance through equity or borrowings of the entity. Here you mention just a knowledge. Then connect with the case, issuance of bonds and bank loans or bank borrowings are used to finance the long-term activities of the entity and are considered as financing activity. The acquisition, you need to mention very categorically. The acquisition of Trudeau company as subsidiary was financed through a bank loan or by a bank loan, and the issue of bonds should be included as a financing activity. Once again, 2 marks. Knowledge and application with conservative counts. Conservative word count. That means very relevant, concise, complete, and relevant. Conservative word count means concise, complete to cover all aspects, and relevant according to the requirement. Now the final point. Bank loan. Bank overdrafts. Bank overdrafts. Normally, the bank overdrafts should be classified as cash and cash equivalent with the presentation of cash flow. This is the case where normally bank ODs, bank overdrafts, it's repayable on demand and form an integral part of cash management. But very important thing, it's repayable on demand. If, a very rare case, if overdrafts more of a permanent nature, then it would be correctly presented with financing activities. Now, further 2 marks. We have done this question, the 6 marks, within 10 to 11 minutes. That's a point. So that is all about this question. I hope that you have learned a lot with this question. But one thing is still remaining. That is about bridging the reflection of bridging the expectation gap, and here by next 10 minutes we will cover the diagnosis of examiner report for this particular question. The diagnosis of examiner report. Now come on. Examiner report diagnosis. So these are some important points I have just extracted from the examiner report of December 23, question 1, Kabelo company. And these points of examiner reports, it's very much important, which the students must be very careful, very noticeable point, these points. So I have actually splitted the points in, or I have splitted the examiner report of this question into two components. Number one, component one or classification one is about numbers. What examiner says about numbers, what you should be conscious about or careful about the numbers, and other aspect about theory. The second aspect about the drafting, about explanation. The second aspect. Is this clear? Now start one by one. The first thing, the first statement mentioned by the examiner. It seems that some candidates may have seen less prepared for a question involve the cash flow statement. Then they would have been with either a statement of financial position or statement of P&L. So students, you must have to prepare all components of the syllabus, all area of the syllabus. Be honest about the completion of syllabus, 100% coverage of the syllabus. Be honest about the coverage, 100%. Number two, here the question about movement of working capital, property, plant, equipment were generated by taking difference between opening and closing balance. Okay, here it's mentioned on the question, and that was a mistake. Candidates needed to know that this method was wrong. Instead, prepare working with full movement between opening and closing. Full movement means opening, ending, and also incorporate the acquisition content. So we must have to aware based on the concept building part of your course. This is a practice question, but examiner expecting that with the concept building, you must have to aware about this point. Number two, when adjusting draft cash flow statements, candidates should be careful with signs, plus minus. What should be plus, what should be minus. Talking about this for adjustment, what should be minus, what should be plus. It's very important. Marks are only awarded for the correct adjustment to original entries. That is addition or deduction. This was particularly important for the adjustment for three movement of working capital: big inventories, trade receivables, and payables. For this point, I have covered with a very detailed aspect. In fact, I have reviewed the syllabus component area in the reconciliation of profit before tax to cash generated from operations. So plus minus signs for adjustments very much important. Otherwise, you will lose the mark. Weaker answer, listen carefully. Weaker answer attempted to revise the spreadsheet by editing the original draft entries. I particularly identified that point and intimated you that point. For example, the adjustment about property plant equipment, acquisition property plant equipment. Here the wrong figure minus 543,600. Examiner expected don't delete this figure. Instead, you just mention the right figure or make adjustment. Make adjustment. That's important. Don't delete or don't adjust with these cells. It's mentioned here. Weaker answers attempted to revise the spreadsheet by editing the original draft entries. Some answers amended the original cell by inserting formula within cell, and other answers deleted and replaced the original entries with the alternative figures. Wrong approach, discouraged by the examiner. A few attempted to present a revised statement below the draft statement, wasting valuable time. Such methods make it harder to link working. The recommended approach is to leave the draft number alone, instead making adjustment in subsequent columns. So very key points. Revise statements. That's important. You need to work out, make a column of revised statements. That's important. Whatever you are adjusting the figure, you just adjust it and revise, and then make a column of the revised adjustments. That's important. Okay, so be careful about these points, about the numbers. About explanation. Candidates can complete a revised statement of cash flow. Revised statement of cash flow. Task A1. And also explain the correction to draft statement of cash flow. Task 2. A2. 1 and 2. There is no need to complete. There is no need to complete task A1 before answering task A2. Some candidates may find it helpful to answer A2 alongside A1, like we did, like we attempted. Some candidates may find it helpful to answer A2 along with A1 to ensure that every step of correction is suitably explained. Working which are presented in a spreadsheet to answer A1 may also prove useful when describing approach to adjustment A2. So once again, I must emphasize one point here. It's your wish. It's your comfort. Either first attempt complete calculation, then attempt theoretical aspect, or simultaneous working. First adjustment, first working, then adjust with the consolidated accounts and draft accordingly. So this is also the approach. What I personally think, that you can save your time. What I personally think, you can avoid the mistakes. Maybe possible. You have done the calculation, then you are writing or drafting the things. You just miss some points, or you just your mind become in pressure for the time management and not able to present up to the mark. But it's totally depend on you, whatever your comfort. But examiner report, the wordings of the examiner reports is reflecting that it's a recommended approach, but it's not compulsory. It's your wish. Okay, weaker answer to A2. Listen carefully. Tended to repeat working from A1 with minimal explanation of why the correction to the cash flow statement required. Examiner expect to draft the answer, not only the interpretation, but the reason of the adjustment. Like we mentioned here, for example, purchase property, plant, equipment. Here we mentioned the reason, the initial recognition of PPE is not a cash flow of the Kabelo. This is the reason. It's not just interpretation. Also mention the reason. Here, goodwill impairment, non-cash item, need to eliminate the reason. That's why we eliminate the goodwill impairment. Deferred tax, the movement of deferred tax is not a cash flow. It's mentioned. So weaker answer is what? Just explain the working. But I'm sure that you will write the answer as a stronger answer. Okay, explanation of these adjustments in answering part 2 were often poor. That is the complaint by the examiner. You people are weak with the space. You perform well for calculation, but weaker with respect to drafting. There are two reasons. You don't practice the things, number one. Number two, more time you invest for calculation and less time for theoretical aspect. So students, final wordings, 2080 rule is a key aspect for practice, for mock exam, and for SBR exam. 20 means plan. Number one, allocate your time, then read, understand the requirement. That means whatever you will write, that's according to the examiner expectation. And finally, brainstorming. First of all, you have to brainstorm. So that is all about from my side. I hope that this complete video, it's very valuable for you. How to draft answer, how to calculate things. What about the ideal, what should be the ideal uh, aspect to draft and calculate and attempt the questions. And finally, the examiner report content as well. If you consider that this complete session is valuable for you, do comment on my YouTube channel. Do comment. That will encourage us for more valuable videos for you people. Okay, thank you very much. Take care a lot. Assalamu alaikum.